we feel that that's a very important issue, especially when you look at the numbers. Right now, there's over 600,000 people with disabilities that live in Chicago. In Illinois, there's almost 2 million people with disabilities. And nationwide, there's over 54 million Americans that have some type of disability. Now, that's approximately 1 out of every 5 Americans. But you know what? Those numbers are way low. We don't know how many people with disabilities are out there. They're much higher than what our estimates are. It's hard to track that because it used to be tracked somewhat on the census. But if you guys saw the 2010 form, they didn't even ask about disability. So it's really hard to tell. All we can really rely on is what the experts tell us. That by the year 2030, about 1 out of every 4 Americans will have some type of disability. So that's a lot of individuals, approximately 1 person in every household. And that's why we feel, especially as you work with serving the public, it's appropriate to know how to interact with people with all types of disabilities. So number 1, you can avoid any discriminatory behavior towards those individuals. And number 2, you can provide equal access to services for them. Now, what does that mean? Well, the context of today, equal services, for instance, when you're having to do with public transportation, for people with disabilities that can't access the mainline transportation, the buses and trains because of disability, there's an alternate service for paced paratransit, as an example. So that's how you sort of level that playing field for people with disabilities when it comes to transportation. And as I'm talking to you this afternoon, sure, I'm here on behalf, talking to you as individuals that will be working perhaps with people with disabilities in the future or planning for those individuals. But think bigger picture. It could be a family member with a disability, with my information will be helpful. Could be a friend, classmate, coworker, or perhaps it could be yourself at some point if you don't happen to have a disability now. Because when you talk about people with disabilities, that's the one minority group anybody can join at any time. So that's why we feel this is a very important topic, especially if you're serving and planning for people with disabilities. Now, what would you guys say is the most commonly used word that's been around for many, many years when you refer to a person with a disability?
Handicap.
Absolutely. Now, that's sort of in the back of your mind. If you saw a person standing on the street corner out here, what would you say they're doing? Panhandling. Asking for handouts, yes. But what do you physically see me doing standing there?
Holding a hat.
Right, just holding a cap with my hand. A hand and cap, hand and cap, handicap. That's where the term originated. Many years ago, in a European country, this didn't start in the U.S., disabled veterans were returning home from their war. And their government, not having any social programs in place at the time to provide benefits for those disabled veterans, actually encouraged them to stand on a street corner and ask for handouts. By the same token, the government encouraged the public to give to these hand-in-cappers. So, if our first exposure to someone with a disability like that, sort of out in society or in public, was someone begging or panhandling, perhaps they had a missing arm, a missing leg, whatever, there's sort of this negative attitude towards people with disabilities that developed from the very beginning. Meaning, you see a person with a disability or handicap, they're going to need some kind of handout or some kind of assistance. Well, that's the type of thinking we have to work to overcome. Because attitudinal barriers are the biggest barriers that people with disabilities face. Architectural barriers are fairly easy to overcome. There's a lot of guidelines about that. You can lower a counter for someone in a wheelchair. You can build a ramp. Those are fairly easy to work out. But the way we think towards people with disabilities, that's really the hardest thing to change. I mean, what do they say? The hardest surface in the world? Right here, the human head. Right? So we know it's going to take a lot of effort to get the word out to the population in general, but we try to do it a little bit at a time, as much as we can. And that sort of negative attitude towards people with disabilities, it kind of led to, in the early days, the medical model when you talk about people with disabilities, which basically means a person with a disability, they're broken. They need fixing. And who best to know what exactly that person needs in all aspects of their life is the medical professionals. Well, how about let's go with the social model, which we're more a believer of. Basically meaning, if you give the person with a disability the right supports and resources they need, and accessibility and accommodations, then they can become productive members of society, like the rest of us want to be. So that sort of lays the foundation. Again, it's all about attitudes and how we interact with people with disabilities. And I'll touch on language towards the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some different disability groups, if you will. And sort of a disclaimer here is that I think we all know at this table that you can't say, well, all people with wheelchairs are doing this, or all people that are deaf are doing that. You can't do that. We all know that. But for my purposes of the training this morning, I'm sort of categorizing these disabilities. Now, first, I want to touch on people that are deaf and hard of hearing. Those individuals fall under that umbrella term of the hearing impaired. But deaf and hard of hearing are not considered the same thing. We're probably saying, well, Joe, that's an easy one, right? If you're deaf, you can't hear. If you're hard of hearing, you have some hearing. Actually, it goes much deeper than that. It's the deaf individuals themselves that say we're deaf. We're proud of it. We're not hard of hearing. We're not hearing impaired. In fact, hearing impaired is a very derogatory term in the deaf community. So you want to avoid using that term as much as possible. But, so you're talking about people that are deaf, more so than any other type of disability that I've worked with for many years, there's a true deaf community, or a deaf culture, I should say more appropriately. Then there's blind community, sure, but there's not a blind culture, if you will, or people on wheelchairs, whatever. Deaf, there's a true deaf culture. Now, I've heard of some situations within that deaf culture in some instances, not all, but in some. If someone wants to have one of those cochlear implants to enhance or provide hearing, some members in that deaf community are opposed to that. It's because it's like you're telling them, oh, you don't want to hear? I mean, you want to hear? You don't want to be part of our deaf community anymore? So they will get offended by that. And think about it. What unites people in a culture? A common language, right? Well, people that are deaf have sign language. So remember, there's a deaf culture that really exists. Now, if you had to interact with people that are deaf, there's certain ways to do it. There's through lip reading. Not every deaf person is a good lip reader. I have two examples in my office. I have two coworkers that are deaf. One's an excellent lip reader. One has a lot of difficulty reading lips. So you can't just say, well, they must know how to read lips if they can't hear. It's not always the case. There's use of sign language. Have to be careful about sign language. And then just simply communicating by writing things down, either just like pen and pencil, that type of thing, or electronically sending information. First, I'll talk about lip reading. Lip reading is a way to communicate, but really that should be in short interactions. The reason I say that is because all the studies show that only about 40% of any given conversation can be understood through lip reading. 40%. So you're talking about, if you're relying on lip reading, there's a chance of being 60% misunderstood. So short interactions, if you have to get by that way, that should suffice. So if the person is reading your lips, there's certain tips. Be in a well-lit area because they have to see your lips, right, to be able to read them. But remember, they're not just looking at your lips. They're looking at your facial expressions and how you're saying something, how you're delivering that message. In other words, they're looking at the total package of you. Because think of it like this. For us that have hearing, we can usually tell just from the sound of someone's voice if they're happy, mad, or sad. Well, if we don't have that, we have to look at other cues. So that's what the deaf individuals do. So they look at how you're saying it, not only what you're saying. Here's an easy one. If someone's trying to read your lips, don't do anything to block it. Don't be chewing on food, that type of thing, obviously. And a lot of people think that when someone's trying to read your lips that you should slow down. Well, guys, that's wrong. Because when you're slow down like that, you're not forming the words properly as they come off your lips. So just have a normal rate of speech like this, and it's much easier for them to understand. Now, I want to do this really quick exercise that I need you to do, and it shows you how lip reading can be misunderstood. All I want you to do is look at the person next to you or across the table, so you're one-on-one facing somebody, right? And while you're facing that person, your colleague, all I want you to do is mouth the two words olive oil to each other. Do that. What does that look like?
I love you, that's what.
I love you? Okay, now we'll move into our sexual harassment. No, but I'm sure I stacked the deck with those two words, obviously. But that shows you how lip reading can be misunderstood. You know, so just be very careful about it. Sign language. It's a recognized language. Has its own syntax, its own alphabet. All I can say is be very careful about using it, because this could happen. Let's say you know a few signs like I do. I'm not proficient in sign language, and yet I have two coworkers that are deaf, but I still don't know the language that well. And let's say you've learned a greeting in that sign. So you meet someone that's deaf for the first time and you sign to them because you want to try your new sign language skills. What do you think they'll do when you sign a greeting to them? They'll start signing back to you. And if you don't understand the language, now you've created more of a barrier in communicating with them. Because I think it's a fair assumption to say that when a person that's deaf is out in public, just the general public, that people that they meet for the first time aren't really going to know sign language. They're not going to be deaf, they're not going to know sign language. I think that's a fair assumption to make. So when they do meet somebody that knows signs, they think, great, I want to interact with this person. And if you really don't know the signs, that causes even more of a barrier. Now, I said I'm not proficient in sign language, but what I do with my coworkers that are deaf is I use I'm more demonstrative, I guess you would say, with using gestures. Example, I might say something like, what time are you going? See, so everything I did enhanced my message with the person. So it made it easier to understand what I was asking, what I was talking to them about. So again, sign language, just be careful about it. And by the way, it's not universal. American Sign Language isn't going to be necessarily understood in other countries, and their sign language isn't going to be understood in our country necessarily. So it's not a, quote, universal language. So I talked about lip reading, sign language. How about simply just write things down? Just pass notes back and forth, easy way to communicate, less misunderstanding. If you are relying on that method, keep what you write short and sweet. The more words you write, the longer sentences, that type of thing, the more of a chance of a misunderstanding. So just keep it brief and right to the point. Or if you need to point to things, you need to point to maps, documents, whatever, that's a good way. You need someone to sign something, whatever. Just point to what needs to be done. Keep it on a very basic level, and it's much easier to understand. And people that are deaf are really the early adopters of technology as well. My two coworkers I keep referring to, they have iPhones. So they're not going to make your basic call with it, but they can communicate with people, they can send text messages, all types of ways to communicate. As a matter of fact, I've seen my one coworker, she will hail a taxi and have the address typed out on the phone and show it to the driver. The driver will take her where she needs to go, she'll see how much it is, pay it there. The whole thing just happened without a word spoken. That's really with the use of technology. Or if she needed to, she could have written those things down on a piece of paper. You know, so that's when you kind of bring it down to the basic level of communication. There's less misunderstandings that way. And as I'm talking about technology, there's a device that's been around for many years called a TTY device. Has anybody seen one of those or used one of those? It's basically a text telephone. And it's a device that has its own keyboard, and it has a direct connect, so it might be 773, like whatever here in Chicago. And a person can type messages to a friend of theirs who has a TTY, so they can type back and forth, which is fine. But with technology now, those are somewhat outdated. But what you should know is, since those devices will not contact a standard telephone directly, a person would go through what they call the relay service. In Illinois, the Illinois relay service, and the number 711. Just quickly, how that would work is, let's say you have a TTY number of somebody, and you need to call that person, give some information about, maybe ask them some questions about a project you're working on. Well, you would dial 711, and the operator would ask what number, TTY number you're trying to reach, and the operator will contact that person and get the communication flow going back and forth. While that is happening, you are speaking to the party that you called, not the operator. The reason I say that is that these relay operators are instructed to type word for word what is told to them. So if you were to say something like, Ask him this. That's exactly the message that will come to just like, ask him so-and-so. That's not the appropriate way to do it. And that works the other way too. A person from their TTY device can dial 711 and give the operator your phone number to reach you. Now, when you talk about communicating with people that are deaf, naturally you're going to be talking about an accommodation using a sign language interpreter. There's some situations that require interpreter, some that don't. For instance, my coworkers that are deaf, we don't have an interpreter on staff. We can communicate just fine in the office with typing messages, writing notes, some lip reading, that type of thing, no problem. But if we were to have like a manager's meeting, we better have a sign language interpreter by law. If we had an all-staff meeting, same thing. You see, so there's occasions where sign language interpreters are absolutely necessary. Now, let's say I was communicating with a person that was directly in front of me that's deaf. In this communication, where would the interpreter stand, do you think? It's one-on-one. I'm speaking, I'm the one that's hearing and speaking, and the person that's deaf is right in front of me. Where do you think the interpreter would be?
Next to you.
Next to me, exactly. Because everything I say is signed to the individual. So they have to have a clear line of sight. Everything they sign back is voiced to me. Fine. The interpreter there is just to facilitate communication, much like that relay operator. They're not part of the communication model, they're just facilitating it. And I know it can be kind of difficult. Remember, it was for me at first when I started using interpreters. I would want to turn to the person that's talking to me. Ask her this, ask him that. That's not the appropriate way to do it. Now, fast forward with using interpreters. The current technology that's out there is a video relay service, meaning it's an internet-based relay operator service. Both of my coworkers have this. At their desk, they have a webcam. Then they can go online and dial up an interpreter, and the interpreter can see them at their desk. And then the individual will sign up to the interpreter who they need to contact. The interpreter will call that person and then get the communication going. But this time it's through the internet. You know, it's not through a phone. So that's called a video relay service. When you talk about also accommodating people that are deaf, you see it on the fixed route services, the mainline transportation, right? You see the signage, that what stop is coming up, you know, how long till a train comes in. That's providing equal access to the information for people that are deaf because it's visual. Now, when we talk about people that are blind and visually impaired, audible is the accommodation for them. You know, so, and also, I was actually at a, out by O'Hare yesterday, there was a conference having to do with making airports and accessible to individuals with disabilities. And one of the cities, I think it's Philadelphia, at their kiosks, they have like a remote relay service. You can actually, you know, punch in something and have an operator come up on the screen who's remotely, and you can, and the person that's deaf can communicate with that person at the kiosk. You know, so there's all kinds of accommodations like that. But anyway, those kind of accommodations are what level the playing field for people that are deaf, and it's about access to the same type of information as anyone else. Now, I want to move on to talking about people that are blind or visually impaired. I just told you guys that deaf and hard of hearing are not the same thing. Well, blind and visually impaired can be considered the same thing to some degree. I know people that are totally blind that say they're visually impaired, or people that are visually impaired that are considered legally blind. And what makes a person legally blind is an acuity of 20/200 or lower. So in other words, the lines between blind and visually impaired are kind of blurred. Now, that's not a pun, by the way, okay? That's just an example. Now, there's certain ways to interact with a person that's blind and visually impaired as far as providing some kind of assistance to them. What kind of mobility aids or device might a person use that's blind and visually impaired? What have you seen?
The stick.
Right, stick or cane.
Service animal.
Service animal. Or a sighted guide, meaning someone with vision assisting a person with no vision or low vision. Well, I brought in a cane today. I know they're pretty straightforward. You know, there's nothing too fancy about them. I'm sure you guys have you've all seen them in action. Oh, by the way, this cane folds up. There's some advocates in the blind community that do not believe in having a cane that folds up because it's based on the principle of you must be ashamed of your disability if you want to fold it up and kind of put it to the side. Again, just some thought that's out there about people that are blind. Now, you'll see a person using a cane. Some will do a tapping motion as they're moving. Some will do a sweeping motion as they're moving. But basically, they're getting a lay of the land. So they're really using it for their cane for their mobility and their safety. Their mobility meaning they can get from point A to point B effectively and efficiently. The safety means they don't run into something. There's stairs going up, stairs going down, there's a doorway there, there's something I need to go around. Is that a water fountain? Is that an ATM machine? They can go around it. So that's a big function, mobility and safety for these canes. Now, when you guys cross the street at the curb cuts, or you're standing on the edge of an L platform, you notice those little bumps that you go across? Some people think they're there for non-skid, some people maybe think they're decorative. Well, those are detectable warnings. So a cane or a person's feet can detect something when they stand on those truncated domes. And think about it, at the curb cut, it alerts you that you're going out to the street because there's that slight change in grade when you do that, right? On the edge of an L platform, well, it's obvious what it alerts you to, right? Too much further, very dangerous because the tracks are straight down. So the cane plays a big role in the independence of people with disabilities. Another thing you might not think about, and there's guidelines on this, that something might protrude out of the wall, could be a water fountain, could be an ATM machine. Someone's walking along the wall using their cane might go right under that because there's nothing there, no crossbar, nothing to alert the person there's an obstacle there. The cane can go right under it, boom! But the thing might hit them in their torso and cause some harm. So there are guidelines, like in the Chicago Building Code, for instance, there's guidelines on how low some kind of detector has to be so a person knows that. Same thing with scaffolding. The Chicago Building Code covers scaffolding as well. Because how many times have you seen the braces on scaffolding, just the bars are like this wide apart, and there's nothing that, there's no low bar something, so a person can, a crossbar can detect that there's some kind of object there. So that's why that device or that bar would have to be there so the cane could realize that, detect that, and the person would know to go the other way, go step to the left or to the right or whatever. So this is the cane. Next, I'm glad it was mentioned service animal because that's the legal term. It's a service animal. Some people call it guide dogs, help animals, those are fine. Not seeing eye dog, that's actually a term that's really being phased out within the deaf community, the blind community. So service animal is a good way to do it. Guide dog is fine to say, but just not seeing eye dog. And service animals, according to the Department of Justice, are basically just dogs. For years people were using miniature horses, they were using monkeys, all types of service animals. And from my understanding, DOJ just said, well, let's just say we'll have coverage, we'll have legal coverage for dogs that are service animals. But remember this about the service animal, it is not considered a pet. And because it's not considered a pet, it has the same right to go into any place that the general public goes that might say no dogs or no pets allowed. I'm talking about public transportation, taxi cabs, hotels, restaurants, airplanes. Those service animals are allowed to go in those places, even though there's you can't bring a dog in here. And it's funny because a call that we get quite often into our office is usually the owner of maybe a small ma and pa restaurant somewhere in the city. And they say, well, there's a guy bringing his dog in here. I don't want his dog in here around my customers while they're eating. I'm going to make him leave. Well, if there's ever any question, this is advice we would give that individual, and this is also advice that what the Department of Justice says. If there's a question you may have, there's two things you can ask the person. Number one, is that a service animal? That's a yes or no, right? And if they say yes, and if you're still somewhat concerned, your next question will be, what function does it perform, or what does it do for you? Now think about it, technically, I did not ask, what is your disability? You can't do that. Sure, their answer might lead you to what their disability is, but you did not ask. That's the whole key there. And generally, service animals are pretty easy to tell. You know, they're not always, you know, the Goldens and the Labs and that type of thing. But generally, they are. I mean, I have a former coworker that has a standard poodle as a service animal. You know, and these service animals have gone through many hours of training before they were ever matched with that individual. And I think the latest statistics I saw was that about it costs like close to $80,000 from the time that puppy is born and taken as a service animal to the time it finally is given to the individual. And the individual doesn't have to pay for that, but it's all covered by donations and that type of thing. But so there's a lot that goes into taking training a service animal sort of to full speed, if you will. So that's the service animal. Remember, they're not considered pets. They can go on trains and buses and, you know, all kinds of situations like that. And then a sighted guide, meaning someone with vision assisting a person with no vision or low vision. With that said, does some brave soul want to come up and help me with a role play on providing assistance? Anybody, just come on up. Right? Okay, but you'll stand over there, please. Okay, here's the situation. I'm coming into to the building here, and I have a meeting in room 418. I've never been here before, and so this is the first person I happen to encounter while I'm in the building. So just for our education, room 418, let's just say it is the doorway down there. Okay, all right, cool. We'll start from that. Is somebody there?
Yep. Hi.
Oh, hi. I'm Joe. Do you know the building very well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey, I'm here. I need to go to room 418. I'm not familiar with this building. Would you be able to give me some assistance there?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Do you want me to go with you, or it's right off here to the left? But do you want me to take you
To the left?
Or sorry, to my left.
To your left. Okay.
But I can take you over there.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we're just gonna walk straight.
Uh-huh.
And then we got a tight space. We're gonna try to fit through here.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. You guys don't have to move. Okay. Come on back. Come on back. We're not through. Now, first, remember, we do these role plays so that we can learn how to do it properly. And, you know, I have to say the one thing that you did, which pretty much everybody does when I do this role play, is as I'm walking towards them, they really don't say anything, which kind of prompts me to hit the old shoes, you know. Or I know some people, they will try to just kind of step out. I call it the Olay move. They'll kind of step to the side and want me to keep going. But here's the best way to handle that situation. Someone's coming towards you, they have a cane, you might have a service animal with them, and you know, you do work here or whatever, you're familiar with the building, and just say, hi sir, you know, I'm Bob or Joe, you know, can I help you? Welcome to, you're welcome to UIC, can I help you? Because that didn't sound like you said very much, but you just gave this person a lot of information. First and foremost, you said something. There's someone standing there, right? Secondly, you welcomed me to the location we're at. I'm in the right place, because the last time I tried coming here, I went to the wrong building, got all turned around. And since you welcomed me, I assume you work here, so you can help me. Now, next we want, what's my business there? Do I need some assistance? Now, I will tell you, in and of itself, it's not offensive to ask a person with a disability if they would like some assistance. That is a fairly harmless, question to ask. Would you like some assistance? They're either going to say yes, or they're going to say no. If they say yes, then a follow-up question should be, how can I assist you? If they don't tell you, which I purposely didn't tell you, then your question should be, how can I assist you? Because at that point, they're the subject matter expert, because they live with a disability. And so whatever I say, you would just follow my instructions, within reason, of course, you would just follow my instructions on how to assist me. Now, the person might say, no, they don't need the assistance. Well, fine, they want to be independent like that, they don't need the assistance. Well, they say, well, just tell me where the room is. Just give like approximate direction. You don't have to bring out a slide rule or anything. You want to go 22.5 feet straight on. You don't have to do all that. You just give them approximate direction, and they can find it on their own, because that's what they choose to do. You know, so provide as much information as you can, you know, to the person. And I will tell you, there is a generally accepted way to assist a person that's blind or visually impaired, and this is the way it would work. Okay, I have my cane in my right hand. You would stand next to me, just slightly ahead. With your arm that's closest to me, you would make an L shape. And then say something to me that I know you've done that and I can grab it.
If you just want to grab my arm right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people, you know, might grab shoulder, wrist, whatever. The idea is that you've alerted them there's something to grab. So once they grab on, then you start walking slightly ahead of me to our location, where, you know, where we're going. You know, just like this. See? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Joe?
Yes.
I've got a question about the dog
Yes.
situation. Does the owner need to carry credentials that it is a guide or a service dog?
Typically, no. I know a lot of people who use service animals do carry that kind of paperwork, like something from the Department of Justice that says the right of that service animal or some particular paper, but generally, no, they do not.
Okay.
And that's a great question because, you know, you hear, because some people will ask for that. They go, well, what says is this is a service animal? You know, they don't have to produce anything like that, no. Now, even though, and this is like the role play that we had, even though you're assisting that person, still provide information to them. Because again, it's sort of equal access to, like if the person had vision, they would see that the room's straight ahead, or you know, this is over here, that's over there. So even though you're guiding them, still tell them, okay, well, we're gonna go to the room 418, it's gonna be straight down this hallway, about, I'd say about 20 feet, and then it's gonna be, we're gonna take a quick right, and we're right in the room. Because think about this, maybe the person is thinking about that route in their head. They know, okay, from the main door I came in, it's going to be 20 feet, blah, 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 blah. You know, because during their orientation and mobility, they were taught things like that, to count steps and this, that, and the other. So that information is very helpful to them because when they leave room 418, they can just retrace their steps to go. You know, or next time they come, they don't need any assistance because they know where room 418 is. You know, but you actually are providing them information that would be very helpful for them to remember that route and that type of thing. You know, so you play a pretty pivotal role in that.